Well, hello everyone. Welcome. My name's Stephanie Hutchings. I'm a HSST in virology in my third year. So thank you for inviting me to talk today. Now, as Sally mentioned, there is another talk on the same topic by Stephen, but I hope we don't cross over too much. But I'm sure Stephen, yours will be totally different anyway. So just a quick note before I start. This isn't a TED talk. I don't consider myself to be an expert, but I thought that perhaps it'll be good to just give some of my experiences and to show things that I've learned personally. I'm not some I would consider myself as an extrovert, but I would say that I don't think I'm very good at this in terms of networking in general, but I am learning slowly. I think it's a love-hate relationship, especially as it can cause some social anxiety. Now, some people will find that it comes quite easily, and others will find it's quite a challenge. But I think that nobody finds it easy. But I think everyone needs to make connections and network within our roles as healthcare scientists, coming into those those roles as leaders. Um, it's intimidating and it's bespoke to you. So however you find it works may be different to someone else, and just finding those things that do work. Um, as I said, we need connections and networks. So I think this is a nice quote to remind us that everyone you'll ever meet knows something you don't, which is quite refreshing. So, some experiences that I've had, I thought I'd put in some good ones and some bad ones. I think some good ones are where I went to an international conference and I reached out to someone I felt quite out of my comfort zone. And they were one of the experts in the field of the research I wanted to speak to them about. And from that, we emailed afterwards, and it may be something that becomes useful in the future. It may not, but I think that was a very positive experience. Um, I started a project with someone who I'd considered to be quite well connected, and that was someone that my supervisor had put me in contact with. So I think those are valuable connections when your supervisor or someone with credibility reaches out and puts you in contact. And I think we should be grateful for those situations. Um, I think there was a situation where I was quite enthusiastic about a service starting and a project that I wanted. So I really made the effort um, to prioritize beforehand and get a presentation together and to talk it through, which I found came out quite well. Now, some bad experiences. I've had a time where I went to a conference and there was someone that was a well-known virologist in the field, and I went up and I wanted to say that was a really good talk, but I just said that was a really good chat, and it completely threw me off. And I ended up having to just quickly finish the conversation, and I didn't really slide it out that well. I've had experiences where I've been in a group situation, and I've either been too nervous to pursue something, um, and I think there's been other times where I've either not introduced someone to the conversation or someone hasn't introduced me, and I've been left out of group emails where you've put in a lot of work to meet those people, make those connections, and then somewhere along the line you get dropped, and it's just something that happens. Um, and being able to deal with that. So I think sometimes that you put in a lot of effort and it might not come to anything, but other times um, you form really good connections, and there doesn't seem to be a pattern always. So, what advice have I learned from experiences? Now, I think when people talk about networking things, that if you talk about networking to become friends with someone in a social situation, people think of those things as quite positive things. But on the other hand, when you talk about networking to network for your career, it can feel a bit cringe or just not genuine. So I think it's about reframing that. So These are just a few of the piece of advice I have. So normally the people that are well connected and the ones that might help you, they are generally the most busy. So use their time carefully. If you're going to say you're going to follow up with networking, do that. If you're given a name to contact, reach out. It shows that you're motivated, confident, and keen. Identify common values. So it might not be something small, but something bigger. And check in regularly, well, semi regularly, if the professional relationship is important to you and you don't work with them regularly. And then just make sure that you're clear if it's a request you're after. And I think we've got to be grateful to the position that we're in if we're HSSTs or other healthcare scientists. And it's our duty to help others to achieve and to get where they want as well. Um, and I think at the bottom there, being sincere, authentic, and approachable are some of my biggest pieces of advice. So, a few thoughts on conference networking. Now, a lot of emphasis is put into networking at conferences, and I actually find it to be one of the most difficult environments for many people, especially scientists. I find that the appropriate timing to network can be hard. I think it's, people that are doing a big talk, they are nervous beforehand, they are getting ready for their talk. They may not have much time, they have just come in for the conference and leaving. I think trying to set up a discussion when you're in the toilet queue is not the right time. So just timing it can be difficult. I think business cards are something that I've seen. I find it a little bit cringe, unless it's from a company or someone that's well renowned. But it's up to you how you go about it. But I'd say conferences are great for networking with companies. They're aware of how networking works and they know how professional relationships work. And it might not create such genuine networks, but it can help you form um, new projects or try out new innovations. But just beware of the free dinners because it's not necessarily always it's not always free. It might be that you're expected something out of it. And I think you might not always be best on your best form if you're tired. I think conferences can be quite chaotic. You're meeting a lot of people, going out for dinner, might be having drinks, so you might be really tired, and it might not be the best time. And I think sometimes you think, oh, if you go with someone to make a new connection, it might be easy, but often it's not. But it's also difficult to go with someone. So I think there's a lot of challenges in networking, and I just think at a conference that's you don't need to put so much pressure on yourself as it's classically known. So just on this slide, I wanted to just highlight it isn't easy for most people. I think regardless if you are introverted or extroverted, we know that networking takes work. Online networking is different to in-person networking, and I feel that I make my most genuine connections in person. But that's not to say that online networking you can't get something out of that. I think you have to reach out and not expect to be approached. And I think some of the most connected people will probably not tell you about all the times they were rejected, but I think you have a lot of rejections for the one for those situations where you do find really good um things out of it, where you make projects or whether you just find something um like some mutual connection. Remember, it's an investment, it takes time, but it's also important to note that it isn't about who gives more or receives more effort. You need to ensure that you give only. And it is, I do believe this, it's a skill you can learn to improve over time. Because if you think about how rubbish toddlers are at communicating and network, then I think that gives us all a bit of peace. I think one of the main piece of advice would be to think systemic and big. So, not necessarily the one particular thing you're working on or how will it help my career. Think of the bigger picture. How will this support our patients if that's what you're after? Or um, actually, are they just in? Is it someone who I'm interested in with something out of work? Or, you know, think about other things that are important. So where do you find meaningful connections? Well, for me personally, I think some of the best work relationships start like our relationships out of work slowly. It could be someone who was on your master's course beforehand, an old colleague who you're friends with and they've moved somewhere else, someone you've met in the tea room in another department. And I think all three of those situations I've either delivered a training course with or came up with a project or just kept in contact because they're one of my friends now. So I think it's important to don't forget the relationships. The people you work with are probably some of the most important. And I think one of the things I've personally learned over the years is that whilst you can be yourself, people like to be approached differently. So there might be someone in the corridor that likes a chat and they want to know about your weekend, and then you discuss something at the end. Or it might be that someone prefers to be only emailed and to have a lot of attention to detail. So working out what people want and how they want to be approached can also help. And then this is what I wanted to say lastly, which I think are things that are important to me. So I think in person, something that I feel quite strongly about is if I'm speaking to someone, that it's a genuine, meaningful conversation rather than kind of looking around to talk to someone else because it feels a bit offensive. If I'm really that boring, then I prefer, shall we mingle together, or, finish the conversation and go somewhere else rather than um, something that's a bit of a pretense. It isn't just transactional. And I think this is a really nice quote by Bob Berg, that networking is simply the cultivating of mutually beneficial give and take win-win relationships. But I think the second bit is the most important. It works best, however, when you emphasize the give part. And I think something we need to know is it's not always inclusive. There's a lot of social bias. There's a lot of bias in terms of characteristics and others. So I think we've got to be aware of that and help include others in those conversations. And we've got the power to change that.